We have a lot of questions. When does the 5-year, 10-year clock start? Application, biometric, and first permit issues.
Yeah, that's one of the main questions we have right now. So we would have this conservative approach by the final text of the law that was approved. You should then consider that it would start from the first card issuance date. However, considering that the government is delaying a lot some of the applications, the fact that before they were accepting the waiting period, they canceled this rule, but the president highlighted that it could not be like that. We had in the past as well, recently, the Constitutional Court here in Portugal condemning this type of action, like that the government could not harm the rights of the foreigners in Portugal. We may still have some good expectations regarding the publication of the regulatory decree that will happen in up to 90 days. So we'll have more clarity on that after the decree is published. As of now, it remains a little like a gray zone, and we'll clarify properly at a later.
GVPR permit still allows you to remove the investment and only have to stay 14 days every 2 years?
In this case, considering that the Golden Visa program remains the same, the law expressly states that the Golden Visa holder needs to keep the investment in Portugal for at least 5 years. It doesn't require Golden Visa holder to keep the investment for continuing having the same permit. Like if you renew the temporary permit after 5 years, or if you apply for the permanent residence permit, you can already withdraw the investment after 5 years.
Another question is for D7 holder. So after 5 years of residence, they could apply for the standard PR, then leave Portugal for years 6 to 10, then apply for citizenship in Portugal after year 10. Is that correct?
Not really. Actually,
so.
the law entitles the residence permit holders to be out of the country for a certain period without justification. For D7, there is a limit for that. If I'm not mistaken, it's also about 24 consecutive months. But then, in this case, if you need to be out of the country for more than the allowed period by law, it's still possible to provide justification. If you have like work-related matters, health issues, and you need to stay longer, you can inform the immigration agency in order to keep your permit. But by procedure, if you leave for more than this allowed period, you will lose the permit. It's not something that is automatically canceled. They will need to notify you to present a justification. It will be an administrative process where you could challenge and dispute the decision as well. It's always possible to discuss but no, it's not possible just to get the permanent permit and then be out and come back at the 10th year.
If you choose not to apply for permanent residency after 5 years, how many times can you renew the temporary residence permit?
You are always entitled to keep renewing it as long as you prove that you were able to comply with the rules of maintaining the investment for 5 years. You are entitled to keep the status, so you can keep renewing the 2 years period permit.
Two other related questions, like what is the living requirement? I think he means the stay requirement for GV application from year 6, which is 14 days every 2 years, right?
Yeah, that's why we have the fees that are higher for the applicants to keep the Golden Visa status. They will need to pay for that higher fees, and we were talking about around 8,000 euros to get the permanent one. It's valid for 5 years, the card, meaning that after 5 years they will need to apply again to get a new card, or they can just decide to apply for the citizenship after the year 10. So to keep the benefit of just staying in the country for 14 days every 2 years, you will need to pay more. If you get the standard permit or the EU long-term residence permit, you will need actually to prove that you are living here. You are entitled to leave the country for a certain period, but it's supposed for you to be present in Portugal to keep that.
Yeah, I think another question is if they apply just for the standard, the normal, what is the annual physical stay requirement?
It is 24 consecutive months that you are allowed to be out of the country. You cannot be out of the country for more than 24 consecutive months every period of 3 years, or 30 interpolated months. You cannot do that. So within the period of validity of the card, meaning 5 years, that's the rule that you will need to comply with.
Do I have to be able to pass the A2 Portuguese exam to be able to exit my investment after 5 years?
No, not really. That's only a requirement for PR. So for the EU long-term residents or the standard PR or even the GVPR, you will need to prove that. If you keep renewing the standard temporary permit, you can withdraw the investment after 5 years and you don't even need to get the certificate of proficiency in Portuguese.
A very similar questions. If we withdraw the investment after 5 years, are we giving up the GV as well, or they are able to keep it?
No, it's possible to keep it. Yeah. I saw that someone was also asking about the possibility of for those who applied before not being affected by the new nationality law. And here is what we still need exactly. Well, first of all, I can tell that it would affect by the text that we have right now, it affects everyone who have not completed before the 5 year period and hadn't applied for the citizenship, but pending applications for citizenship will not be affected. On the other hand, visa applications, residence permit applications, and also their holders, visa holders, permit holders, if they hadn't completed 5 years and hadn't submitted the application, yes, they would be affected.
So with the 5 years GVPR, you still need to visit 14 days every 2 years.
Yeah.
Would that possible to change back to prior decree, or the trend is getting more tighter in the near future?
Yeah, it's hard to tell. They are adjusting a lot of rules related to immigration and nationality. We noticed that over the past years, but they already changed a lot in order to restrict the possibilities. We don't really believe that they are going to restrict it even more. It's not likely, also because 10 years is the most they can go for the citizenship application. Maybe in the near future, actually, we will have more benefits. They can change it again to create more benefits because they might feel that they will need to attract more investors and more people coming to Portugal. So it's possible that in the near future, I'm optimistic. I believe that they could even decrease the period again.
So are there any special provision available to get the resident permit much earlier than 1 year? They can sue, right?
Well, yeah, there's always a possibility of filing a lawsuit against the government in order to ask for an appointment. But this should be based on an urgent matter, actually. So it usually works for those who are living in Portugal or who decided to come and live for a while. Like if they can prove that they have a proof of address in Portugal, they can file the lawsuit and ask for an appointment due to the government's delay, because by law, they have up to 90 business days to provide a decision. If they pass this deadline, they are under a delay that could not be justified. So some people are filing lawsuits to get that, but it's hard as well to predict if that will be effective, because we know that the judiciary here, the courts are packed with those cases, and sometimes it even takes longer to get an appointment than if you would go through the normal path, considering that they have their task forces right now in the immigration agency and they can provide an appointment sooner than expected. I can tell that we had in the past people waiting for 2 to 3 years to get an appointment because of the pandemic. But recently, we already had clients who applied in late 2025 and they already got their appointments. So the tendency is to have a reduced waiting period until they finally respect the 90 days deadline.
We forecast or maybe in next year it will go back to normal because they're clearing up all the backlogs this year already. There's another question. If you're on D7 or D8, can you switch to GV later to bypass the residency requirement? Definitely.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's more common than it seems. Because we have, for example, people who relocated to Portugal under a D7 visa or a different residence visa type, but they no longer can comply with the stay requirement. So even us here with the Gold in Portugal, we had cases like that, that they had to switch to the GV so they could go back to their countries and keep the resident status. So in the end, they can still apply for the citizenship. So yeah, it's possible to switch. You won't keep two cards. They will switch the D7 one to the Golden Visa one.
If not able to apply for citizenship after 5 years of GV PR, will the renewal required investment be kept and the children need to maintain dependent state.
Yes. So the investment, as we mentioned, it's possible to withdraw after 5 years and still keep the golden visa status if the applicant decides to keep paying for that, and well, higher fees will be involved. As for the children, once you apply for the permanent permit, they will hold independent residence permits. So we usually recommend families to like still have some sort of proof of dependency, at least for the moment when they apply for the permanent permit. But after that, during the 5 years period, you no longer need to prove that. And we understand that you don't even need to prove that for the permanent permit application. It's always risky to get someone who doesn't really understand about the process and may ask for this extra document. So that's why it's also very important to have a lawyer accompanying you during the whole process.
What is the requirement for getting the EU long-term resident card?
It's very simple, actually. It's basically the same as the standard PR. So you just decide whether you want to apply for one or another, but the requirements are the same. You need to prove that you were holding a residence permit in Portugal for at least 5 years, and you need to prove proficiency in Portuguese language level A2. Also, some standard requirements like updated criminal records or like passport, those simple that we have for every application. But it's the same process. You just decide if you will go to the standard one and the EU long-term one.
Can you apply for EU PR permit, then still stay in Portugal for 14 days every 2 years, and also live in another country in the EU until year 10 and get citizenship in Portugal after 10 years?
Yeah, no, unfortunately, that wouldn't work. The EU long-term residence permit would be a good option for those who were willing already to relocate to another EU country, but then you would give up of the period you had in Portugal, and it won't count for the 10 years in order to apply for citizenship here. The citizenship here by residence will always require proof of a Portuguese residence permit for that period.
And then there is a scenario of, let's say they hold the permit for 1+2+2. Actually, the first card should be 2 years already, 2+2+2+5. And they apply for citizenship. Do they need to renew waiting for the citizenship? Yeah.
Yeah, the citizenship application also has like a waiting period. Currently, it's taking, I would say, quite a long time, like up to 2 years, more or less, around 2 years. They're also trying to clear the backlog for that. But let's say you still have the intention of like coming to Europe or staying in Portugal. So you will need to renew the permit after the 10th year. But if you just need the passport later, if you don't need to use the benefits of a resident in Portugal or the European Union, then you can just wait and then get the passport. But then you would lose these rights. It really depends on each situation.
Is there any possibility that this revocation could be applied to those who submitting their application before this law was passed, meaning those applicants were grandfathered into a 5-year period? Yeah, if you submit it before.
The citizenship application, yeah, but we understand that a lot of people are concerned as like a residence permit holder. They had the legitimate expectations of having the passport after 5 years. It is indeed legit to think like that. We still need to understand exactly how the decree will be, but the decree won't reduce the minimum period of 10 years. They will just clarify when the clock starts. So some firms, some colleagues of mine are advising also to prepare legal action to claim that. We still need to wait a little more to understand if that's going to be a good path. But some firms are also starting to prepare like class actions against the government. So we still have some time to see the developments of those discussions, and we are understanding right now how the new scenario will be. So we are always on top of the changes, and we'll have a clear picture of that in the next few days and months.
And one question is they want to know for the minimum residency, like the 14 days every 2 years, how do the government verify this? Is it based on the entry and exit records, hotel accommodation proof, or other
Yeah.
documentation.
Yeah, it's always important to keep records of the itinerary, like when you travel to Portugal, to prove that you indeed entered here. Because sometimes if you enter the Schengen area through a different country, you may receive a stamp from this other country, then you travel to Portugal and have no stamps. So to prove that, you need to have like the itinerary, the flight tickets, also hotel accommodation is good. And now we have the new EES system for border control in Europe. So this will replace the entry stamps. So you might not anymore have entry stamps in your passport. There will be a system where all countries will be able to check if you entered here or not. So we understand that in the future they will be more developed on this part in order to access the EES system. But as a matter of precaution, we always recommend our clients to keep the proof of itinerary and hotel accommodations.
Yeah, they also ask, can they go to other European country during this time? But by law, you need to stay 14 days. But yeah.
Yeah.
When IMS processing the citizenship and the PR expire before the citizenship is granted, will there be any issue? You need to have a, yeah.
No,
valid.
for the application, you do need to have a valid residence permit. But if it expires in the meantime, it doesn't really matter because what matters is the moment when you applied.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you so much. And we are available if anyone needs help, can always book a call with us.